So this panel is on automated metadata and whether or not there's an easy button, and there's going to be a big reveal about whether there is or not an easy button. I'm sure you'll all be amazed at our answer. So how we're going to do this is we've got Josh Wiggins from Meta, I keep saying Meta Farm, GrayMeta, and Todd Carter, yes, I got your name wrong, yes, right? Oh yes, I'll get to me in a sec. From Tagasauris. They're both going to give a quick rundown on who they are, what's possible now, what can be done, and then we're going to have a discussion up there to just talk through some of the issues that have come up, where we're going, what we think we could do now, what this all means, and then we're going to open it up for questions. And I am Sally Hubbard, and I work with the fabulous folks at Viacom and MTV, and with the equally fabulous folks at NYU, some of whom are here today. So where's Josh? Josh, I think you're up first. So you don't have to do this, you can do that. I don't know what you...
I'll try this one. Thank you, Sally. Where's the clicker? So. Hi, everyone. Josh Wiggins with GrayMeta. Thanks for the invite for being here today. So I'm going to go through a few slides quickly and then hand over to Todd. But I don't know if there's an easy button, but there's definitely a it's easy to get started button. So a lot's changed with metadata over the last kind of 5 to 10 years. And I'm going to go through kind of what we're doing with machine learning and leveraging people in the workforce to actually use machine learning to create metadata. So I have a background working for some of the media service vendors like the Ascent Medias and the Deluxe. And when I came over here, I did it because I took a look back over the last kind of 20 years about where we've come from, or 18. I haven't been around that long. But a lot of how we've got here is there's been facilities. So we've grown our facilities. Companies have gone global. They've put offices overseas. And when they did this, they needed to be able to put more people there to go and carry out the human tasks. As I've walked around London in some of the large post houses or localization houses, they're full of a lot of people. And every time more content was getting grown or Netflix came to bear, they were just cramming more and more people in there. So what happened is we were just exploding with people, and the trouble is the jobs got boring. I'm not here to say that kind of everyone has a boring job, but we spoke to a lot of the broadcasters, and they said the trouble they're facing is they've got people that are good employees, but over the last kind of 5 to 10 years, they haven't been able to evolve them. So they're actually losing people to the Netflix and the startups and all the Googles of the world. So what happened is about 8 years ago, it was the kind of the cloud guys started popping up. So the Amazon made it easy to go up to the cloud. You had all the private clouds offering public services. And people started to get their toe in the water. Some of the earlier sessions talked about silos, the Viacom team. In silos, Viacom is a global company, many different locations around the world, and what that did is created silos. Not every on-prem facility was connected to the other one. So we've seen that there's kind of 1 foot in the cloud, 1 foot on-prem. The cloud scales well, obviously, and the cost is better over time. And now we've got to the point where, this is where we got involved. I joined the company about a year ago, is now you can actually easily start to use machine learning, cognitive services, neural networks. The first presentation talked about you can actually need developers or APIs or working with JSONs. Amazon are doing some great presentations in the market, but they'll tell you they sell to developers, they sell to programmers. So if you've got a team of people that want to build applications, then it's very easy to start consuming, whether it's Amazon, Google, IBM, Watson. But if you don't, there's a bit of a gap in terms of platforms or services that make it easy for people to consume these services, and that's what we're doing. And we started out to create an API service or a platform that allowed people to do this quickly, because everyone's talking about AI and machine learning, and we've basically come to the point where you've either got to decide how you're going to embrace AI and machine learning, because if you just sit there and don't start, it's going to define what's going to happen to you and your workforce and your department. So I think the easy button is a good question. I would say it's easy to get started. And if people are going to procrastinate and say it's going to take a year to figure out our schemas and lock down the specification, I think that's where you're going to fail, and AI and machine learning is going to define you. What you've got to do is leverage these technologies that are out there. Many of the vendors are trying to figure out how to integrate that in, and that's what we're doing at GrayMeta, is providing a platform to allow many of the MAM, DAMs, asset management systems to actually leverage machine learning. So what's caused this is there's just so much content getting created, whether it's the archives are growing or it's new productions like Netflix and Amazon, there's just so much content getting created. So whether you're a lab or a post house, the capacity is a problem, right? So the way that they're solving it is by just throwing people at it. Whether you're a buyer or a network, there's more and more content to buy. So what it does is it hemorrhages the supply chain, where vendors are forced to do things quicker and more volume, but they're not actually making more money for it. In order to meet the orders, they're throwing more bodies at it. The economics don't make sense. The good news is there's so many more devices, whether it's the YouTube or the new OTTs or just streaming via the web, there's so many more ways to consume the content. So we're seeing the amount of content that's out there, the variety of it, and the speed by which it's coming to bear. It's not just about tentpole titles from studios, it's YouTube actually subsidizing all the production for ad revenue. It's different with how content's being created. So we try to have a funny moment here. So what we're seeing a lot of is that we're doing a lot of calls with international clients where they're asking for the archives. This wasn't happening 5 years ago. I had the pleasure of working with Andrew at Paramount, and it wasn't like people were saying we need every moment of the archive. They had great content deep in that archive, but we're finding right now that whether it's an archive from 50 years ago or it's the content that an Indian broadcaster bought last year, they do not know what's inside their content. Their asset management systems have told them what is their content, but they need to really understand what is inside the content, and this takes curation, logging, because what they're worried about, and someone touched on this earlier, was about the ad revenue. If you're an incumbent broadcaster in whether it's India or South America or in Europe, and you've had the eyeballs and the advertising is what's paid for you to be that broadcaster. But when you've got people like Amazon coming to town or your country with things like Amazon X-Ray, which what Amazon X-Ray is the ability to look deep inside your content. How are they doing that? They're doing that leveraging their own machine learning. So what's happening is incumbent broadcasters are worried that if they don't know what's inside their content and they can't drive ad units to their programming or create a better recommendation engine on their electronic program guide, then Amazon or a Netflix and someone like India is going to prevail, and they're going to get the ad dollars versus the incumbent broadcaster. So we're seeing now that people are asking for archives. We had a music client that literally said they had 50,000 hours. They've got so many deals to get around the world, but the economics with the incumbent post house did not make sense for them to do it. So we believe that leveraging some of the MAM systems that are out there by integrating in machine learning and AI services, the economics actually make it sense to distribute some of these archives. So part of the problem is there's so much that you can do with this. We're working in M&E. We also at GrayMeta are looking in law enforcement and healthcare. So this is a slide that talks about how we picked some of the things in M&E to focus on. Compliance. So I brought that up. Is compliance an issue within archiving and preservation? I don't really know. But in distributing content around the world, compliance is a huge problem. The amount of money that someone like Amazon is paying right now to distribute their whole library to India, it's crazy. And they're doing it with a little bit of machine learning from the vendors, but a lot of people that are actually manually having to review everybody's content. So we're using machine learning technology to actually find out what's in the content. Is it 100% accurate? No. But it's actually, the slide that was shown earlier is right. I mean, 95% of the words from IBM Watson or Microsoft are correct, or 95 of the 100 words are correct. So it's good enough right now. And if you actually bring an element of curation, you can leverage the existing workforce to actually correct the errors and make it right. So whether it's in-flight entertainment, where people are spending 2 days to review a tentpole title for all the compliance regulations for in-flight, now you can actually start to use machine learning to find things like smoking, drug use, bad words. That's speeding up the time that it takes. So we're focusing on compliance. And then search and recommendation. This has mainly been outside of the US, but we've seen internationally that a lot of the broadcasters, they have title-based metadata. They don't know what's in it. They don't know the happy moments. They don't know the sex scenes. They don't know the car chases. They may have had it for a tentpole title or a Game of Thrones show, but they don't have it for the whole of the archive. So we're trying to use machine learning where a lot of human capital is being used at the moment, where there's incumbent post house vendors that are been charging $100 per unit for a task. They're not really incentivized to use machine learning and come back and say, hey, I found this great technology. I'm now going to do it for 75% of the cost. That isn't going to happen. So it's looking at the new type of vendors that are out there. We've just announced that we're working with Levels Beyond and Reach Engine because we wanted to look at new asset management platforms. So our integration with them is to speed up the ability for their customers to be able to leverage machine learning. So we wanted to make that we're an API service. This is an example that we heard. So everyone talks about AI. And this is a real example from a European broadcaster that has a huge sports and news archive. They were so excited about an AI launch that they did with a chatbot on their website. The trouble is, it kind of ran out of answers to the questions. And I think Christy King was speaking about answers and questions. I think, did you ask that question? So this is interesting because it's no different than when you ask Alexa something, it might say, I did not understand. What it meant is it didn't have the data to give the answer to the question. So what we see using cognitive and machine learning in the archives is you could take the last 3 years of a sports archive and you may have great tagging data because they put a new tool in place 3 years ago. But when you go back after 3 years, you don't know what they have. So this diagram is showing where we're working with a number of broadcast archives to apply machine learning to generate at a very fast pace machine learning data that their curation team, their experts in the sport are going in and adjusting and tweaking so that when you ask this AI-driven chatbot about where a certain team beat a certain team in 1982, it gives you all those moments. So I just wanted to bring this up as why metadata is so important for a lot of these really cool AI-driven efforts that are out there. Just a little bit about GrayMeta, and again, not here to kind of push what we're doing, it's more to talk about why you can start using machine learning now and you shouldn't be scared of it. So we put in place a platform that we wanted to be able to plug into the existing tools that are out there. So if you've got a system you picked 2 years ago, we're not trying to make you throw it out. We want to be able to come in, and what we've done is created a platform. Everybody hasn't gone to the cloud yet. You've still got a boatload of content that's sitting on premise, right, in different file systems. We've got law enforcement that still have mainframes, right? So we have technology that connects to on-premise storage and cloud storage. We're extracting technical information. If you don't have that technical index, we can provide that as an API. And then the machine learning is where we really went out to really be an aggregator of these services. So you do need people that understand how to take that data in. It's not just taking a API return and saying, oh, it's a face. He's happy, he's sad. So we basically connect into IBM, Google, Microsoft, a bunch of academic institutes to create that machine learning. And that index is available over an API. And the idea is, it isn't just about us having an application. There's so many systems out there that if you plug this data into it, they're going to get better. So the goal is that using this API, existing partners can be integrated with along with customers. So, quick look here. So we wanted to make it simple. So again, faces, simple UI, we're not trying to be a MAM system. We added curation. We wanted everything to be in a timeline. We wanted to bring ad compliance. So not just searching in a big database. We wanted to say, well, if I'm looking for Ofcom or I'm looking for nudity, how do I find where it is across all of my library? Where's all my OCR? What's on screen? Where do I have the adult moments? So we created a simple reference UI so that when people can integrate, everything we have in our platform can be integrated into any MAM, DAM, or CMS with a RESTful API. So that's a little bit about what we're doing. So I think over to you now, Nick.
All right, and now for Todd, then we'll lead into the discussion, folks.
Hi, guys. So my name is Todd Carter. I'm the founder of a company here in New York called Tagasauris. We started Tagasauris in 2010 with funding from NYU Innovation Ventures. The original idea of Tagasauris was, could we get humans and machines to work together to achieve outcomes in terms of multimedia content description, to achieve outcomes that neither constituency would produce in isolation. We ran that platform, I would say successfully, through 2014, but then started to have some ideas about where things were going that caused us to want to change, and we thought in terms of changing, in terms of market, in terms of content type. So we've been working on the problem of video information retrieval really subsequent to that. My principal interest in talking today, this is sort of like this little metadata maturity model. Jim's talk at the beginning, he chatted a little bit about, a lot about the semantic web. This is really where we've been focused from day one. Tagasauris has always been a semantic annotation service. It's not a tagging service. Maybe the name is unfortunate. Tags are just words. Annotation implies linking. We've always been about linking. Our vocabulary was always derived from community data sources like Wikipedia and Freebase. So I'm really interested in this level 6 end of the spectrum and not so much the other levels. So yeah, right. So this was the challenge. Nick asked me to talk about, is there an easy button? I don't even know if an easy button is the right question. The reason I don't like the idea of an easy button is it implies some industrial one-way process. It implies that you push this thing, you get data, and you're done. I don't think that's how the world works. I don't think that's how knowledge is represented anymore. Unfortunately, this would have been nice if I could play an animation, but this is a slide from a service called Listen to Wikipedia. It's the sonification of Wikipedia edits. I encourage you to Google it and check it out. The cool thing about Wikipedia, or as Jim pointed out, DBpedia, is that the community is maintaining it. And in fact, the edit rate is about 12 times a second. So you see this kind of massive knowledge base that is not a dictionary, it's not Webster, it wasn't published and then shipped, it is continuously curated. And I think this is critical when you think about collections, right? People die, events change, new information is found. So a quick word, we're all here sort of sitting on top of these incredible asset libraries, yes, they're driven, our media businesses are largely driven by advertising. But the problem is that things aren't going so well. This is the newspaper advertising revenue. That's 2012 at the end of the curve. As you can see, just about the time we started Tagasauris, many of our customers, McClatchy, Digital First, the New York Times, their revenues were dropping off a cliff. And the reason for that, I think, at least in part, is attention is increasingly expressed in really visual terms. And so you look, this is just Amazon Alexa data that tracks Pinterest page views, time on site, basic KPIs to New York Times KPIs. And then I used Wikipedia just as a kind of as a baseline. And what you see is that people's attention gravitate towards things like Instagram, towards things like Pinterest, towards sites that express our culture in more visual ways. Lest you think that problem is not coming to motion, it is. This is what is happening. We call this the attention apocalypse. It is the drop-off of TV viewing amongst different age groups. And I just want to point out that if you're under age 24, you're not watching. It's a cliff, right? You're not consuming content in the same way. And I think as archivists whose funding comes from organizations who have made money from attention, this is something really imperative for us to get our heads around quickly, or we're going to be out of jobs. I would also say that attention is not just visual, it's also shortening. And so this is sort of the effect of duration on attention. People don't have a lot of time. They want to find what they want to find quickly. They're not going to sit and don't expect people to sit and play a video, a 15-minute video from front to back. You will lose your audience. So you've got to get people to the moments that they care about. So in 2015, the Walt Disney Corporation, Walt Disney R&D, asked us to help them better understand that problem. They had a real challenge with their episodic television catalog, with their movie catalog. They wanted to know how they could better understand how people engage with their content. And we worked with them on something called the Creative Genome to do that. I want to take some sort of takeaway principles from that, I think, things that we heard from, again, in Jim's talk. We need sort of smart ways to describe audio-visual content, including sort of schema, vocabularies, and semantics, right? So when I hear about people building taxonomies by hand, that is not necessarily, I don't necessarily view that as a smart way to do it. Smart ways to store that data that support querying and inferencing. And then smart ways to consolidate the machine, expert, and end user meta descriptions, the metadata that we can generate from machines, experts, and end users. Smart ways to persist that. Just a little quick thing on how we approach the problem. So we said, let's break video back into its sort of component form. Let's roll it back to like it was when it existed in the NLE, back to shots and scenes and even elements. Let's look at multimodal content analysis, enrichment, and linking. So let's not just focus on vision or text or sound. Let's use all those things. And let's make sure that we can query and inference over the resulting data. And so We felt to do that, you couldn't do this with machines alone, and you couldn't do it with humans. You had to have a cooperation between the two. And you wanted to put those in a way together that could exploit data network effects. So could exploit, for example, a giant corpus of Wikipedia with thousands of named people. That seemed like, why recreate that wheel? And so this is an area that we put a lot of time into focusing on. So in terms of language understanding, this is a 15-second commercial. It's for Mazda CX-5. We want to take the transcript of that, take the spoken part of that, if there's no transcript available. In this case, we used speech-to-text to turn it into a transcript. We used humans to clean the transcript. We ran it through an NLP system that extracted entities. The entities are linked behind the scenes to Wikipedia, Wikidata, Freebase, and then from that we extract a bunch of topics, and that's all automatic, and that's sort of on the language piece. On the vision and sequence understanding, it's what James showed exactly. You're taking frames. In this case, we were sampling this commercial at every 500 milliseconds, twice a second, and we're using a dense captioning system to identify and localize objects within the video, and then to describe them in natural language. So it's a little hard to see, but if you look underneath each of those thumbnails, each one of those little colored frames has a corresponding colored text string that is the machine's prediction about what is in the box in natural language. And so that's one model. It's based on a system called the visual genome. But we use other models, TrekVid, Inception, Places2, to add additional data to that. Oops, too many. I've blown my thing. 1 second. Back. So that's sort of like just a blow up of what it looks like. This is from an episode of Westworld. This is what a machine, what this MS Coco trained model is currently able to extract from that. It finds a bunch of objects and it writes this caption automatically. Each of those regions can be indexed and persisted. Sorry, this button is sensitive. So the problem is, if you look at that MS Coco model on the Westworld scene, it was very generic. It was a steam train. It was on the track. It didn't have any specific character information. So what if we want to build some fine-grained models that know about the locations in a particular series or episode, or that know about the characters? What we did was build a system that allowed us to put in a IMDb URL, a URL to a series page. It finds the series page. There's a little red square that says there's so many images down there. It trains a model, and out the other end of that, you get, one more time, you get automated character recognition. So that's a really cool way of using community data to sort of bootstrap yourself into character recognition. And again, these data sets are out there. Wikipedia has, I think, over 600,000, maybe Laura or Jim know the number, 600,000 plus named people. You can use those things to start to train models, and they're organized by sports figures, race car drivers, in all kinds of different domains. And I would say also, another data challenge, another place where humans make it easy, lest you think this is easy, it's not, because something like face detection has all these challenges. The models tend to not be so constructed with respect to things like scale, pose, expression, makeup, illumination, and so you need to go back and get more examples for the model. Well, where are you going to do that? You really need humans to go find those kinds of images with that kind of variability and plow that back into your system so that you can improve the results. And I would also say, this is a video, I don't know if it'll play, but in addition to sort of the text extraction and the object recognition segmentation, we're also learning about sound events. And so this will come into focus in a moment, and then the prediction will be revealed. So that's yet another signal. So this is why I called it sort of a multimodal approach, because you're taking signals from text, you're taking signals from the vision system, you're taking signals from audio, from available metadata, and you're using all those things to try to hydrate a model, a semantic model. And so this is sort of a small version of the linked data cloud that models stories and episodes and cast and crew. And it's this type of approach, the linked data approach to media, that there are a group of people now referring to that as linked media. So we have linked data. Can we apply those exact same principles to media? And so we can, and it's a very simple approach, and I'm not going to dwell on this, but I think it's important. The important thing about linked media with respect to video is the standards organizations, there's already a media fragments 1.0 standard. People don't realize it, but in Firefox, Chrome, Safari, this capability are built into the browser. So you can extract temporal regions, you can extract spatial regions, you can resolve those things in the browser natively. It's a standard. And the same with tracks. So, I think organizations like AMI don't have to be so worried about maybe creating standards, it's just using ones that already exist because they're out there. And another point I think we feel strongly about is, it's not, I think, there's lots of different MAM and DAM systems, archive systems, social media systems. The key is sort of unifying that metadata into some sort of graph structure. Let the content sit where it is, let the assets sit where they are, focus on the meta information. And I would also say that web annotation itself is now a standard. That's just been released. And so I feel like there's many more slides that I could go through. I maybe will just skip through them quickly. The ability to, when you think about these, maybe that's not going to work. Okay, so the ability to think about these sort of, sorry, this seems to have, no, you know what it might be? The slide might have some logic that says I feel like there's like some, yeah, there you go, some sort of delayed response. I was just going to make this point that once you get all of that metadata together, then you can take a piece of video, you can connect all the things that appear in the video to these Wikipedia endpoints or linked endpoints. They don't have to be Wikipedia. And, oh man, sorry, I'm really making a mess of this. This is how you can create these kinds of relationships to community data. And you could then use those in fascinating use cases like lighting up lectures, connecting TED Talks to all the interesting places where on the web where that kind of information exists. We built something called Shop YouTube that makes content in YouTube shoppable by linking things that appear in the video to the browse nodes of Amazon catalogs. These are all the kinds of, I think, use cases that are possible and exciting for the future, and that's what I'd like to, hopefully the panel can get into some of this, and I think without finishing the whole presentation, I'll leave it there.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, guys. So I think what we saw then is there's some real things happening. This really. Sorry. Yes. Okay. Yes. Can you hear me now? So what we're seeing now is things really are possible. There really are things happening, and I think we'd maybe like to talk a little bit more about what that means. I think it's clearly we're not dispensing with humanity quite yet. I think that's clear. We're maybe moving away from data entry to data curation. We're not dispensing with specifications and standards and all that good old library information stuff. That's evolving and it's changing, and certainly you should reuse where you want to. But I think maybe we should throw that around a little bit more. Please, we can wait for questions later, but if you have questions now, please bring them up. So I'd like to talk a little bit about what this means, and then maybe later on, what is the value? There are a few points about that in the morning session, like what is the value of this? I think there's some interesting things happening there too. So anyway, what does this mean? Any thoughts?
I mean, to me, I like the slide from Jim's presentation where he had this I call it the holodeck. There was a slide where he had brought together different feeds in a room, and you could sort of go in there and maybe sort of like a storytelling. And I think, to me, we're talking about computational culture. Culture is expressed in visual terms. We're making it computational, and it seems like this scaffolding is in place now. We don't have to invent the standards. We don't have to solve how to fragment or segment media. We don't even have to solve fully the description problem. There's enough data available from these APIs to sort of bootstrap yourself into usefulness. And so it seems to me like now it's about creativity. It's like, maybe it's a deeper analogy, but they say that vision occurred over like 530 million years with the first creatures that had sight, that created the Cambrian explosion. Like that suddenly there was this explosion in life because vision changed how this is the beginning of predation. The point is, we're at that same sort of explosion, it seems like right now, like this explosion in capability, and it needs creativity and creative thinkers, I think, to get beyond just looking at digital assets from the perspective of operational efficiency, and look at new revenue, because that's what gets your business organization animated about investment.
There was actually a lot of us just came back for the NAB show, the National Association of Broadcasters show, and there were lots of interesting panels there actually about like the 3 use cases almost for all this analytics and this broad space. And one was operational efficiencies. 2 was recommendations. I think we're probably familiar with that, and both of you talked about that. But the third one was being able to feed it back, take risk out of the creative process. Because one of the reasons we have Son of Marble Rides Again 2 is that it's less risky. These things cost a lot of money to make, and if they can work out some way of predicting the interestingness, which is one of the terms that was used, of something, you could maybe tweak around, what can you tweak, what can't you tweak? How can you really make something new and still have it make money for you, which I think is an interesting way it could feed back into the creative process. Josh, what do you think?
I think what's interesting from the vendor side is people want to do more POCs. Viacom lady was talking about they did like 3 POCs in a row. We've seen that people don't want to go out to a big, massive RFP or a tender because what they might need now is very different than in a year from now. So we've seen a lot of people just want to get started to do a POC. And then you talked about revenue, but I think the other thing is cost. So a lot of people aren't getting told what the price is. So we've seen people that have been in 6-month pilots with large organizations that think it's a multi-million-dollar solution that they need. But the thing is, if you can actually understand that you can actually get going, like for 1,000 hours of content, it's probably going to cost you about $5,000 with these machine learning platforms. Like, it isn't crazy to actually process content in the cloud, and I think POCs is the way to go. It lets people get kind of stuck in. And the other thing is, we made a decision not to get caught up in different taxonomies for different customers. This was Jim's point earlier. We just said, we're not doing taxonomies, right? We have an index, we have an API. If you have a taxonomy system, use the API to come in and integrate into this index. So I think that's something as well. We're not trying to be custom for everybody. We're just trying to make it easy to use the data.
Yeah. No, I feel I'm going a little bit from a utopian to a dystopian part of this, but I think one thing we do have to think about with what's possible now is the imperfections of what's out there. This really is a field in its infancy, and it's suddenly become amazing in the last few years. I remember first reading about it in that same Scientific American article in 2002, and from there to that idea to where we are now is amazing. But there are still issues with these cognitive processes. We know about if you train any system to recognize humanity as people with pale skin, you're going to get problems if you run up against a data set that has people who are not pale. There was the issue of Belsen being identified as a playground. There's been all these sorts of issues, and we talked about that too. So maybe we should talk a little bit about that side of it.
I would make the argument, I think, that cognitive systems can be wrong and still be useful. I think search engines are a great example of that. For many years, Google was not as accurate as it is today, but it was still useful. We couldn't function without it. And so I know these systems are imperfect. I think, from my perspective, you need to be tolerant of that. and they'll get better over time. And that's why it's not a metadata push button. That's why it's a process of continuous enrichment, because the data sources, the Wikipedia, people are editing it 12 times a second. It's getting better every second.
Yeah, this is absolutely a human curation issue. This is one of the places where you want humans.
And I would say it's almost like it comes back to almost like a knowledge management issue.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is
knowledge management.
This is where you showed building models. So I think this is where you can use the people. If you just upload an image to Google, it may not get it right. But if you looked at the UI you showed, it's very easy now to build a custom model, because facial recognition will find someone's face, but if they've got a hat on and a big beard and they're stood to the side, you may not know who that is. So I think building models is a lot easier to do, to actually get better results.
Right, so once you have that model, then maybe it's not very good at pose or occlusion, but then you can train for that and improve the model. And so you're constantly running and rerunning. It's not push and done. It is continuous enrichment, continuous improvement, and you're absolutely aggregating machine, expert, and then end user, meaning crowd. The people formerly known as your audience are some of the most useful folks that you could pull into your
There is a data sharing issue here, though, because we've seen a lot of content owners say, I don't want to give my data back to Microsoft or Google. So this is this intermediate index where you can build a model where you're not giving that data back. So I don't know how...
I think it's an interesting point, too. We've seen this as well, with linked data. So let's say we've done work for a number of different studios over the years. And what we have found, it's like the studio doesn't want to share its data, so they view metadata as theirs. To me, we need to start thinking of metadata as a network good. We live in a world of ubiquitous connectivity. We live in a world of ubiquitous content. It's all networked. We've got to think of metadata as a network good. And in that context, you want to be authoritative for your stuff. So to the extent that you're hoarding it, you're no longer the authoritative go-to place for Batman on the web, because there's some community resource that's got data that's 10 times better. So I think this is a two-edged sword, and it all comes back to that engagement issue. I think attention, right? So now, guess what? You're Disney, you've got Nashville. Well, where do fans go to find out about Nashville? They go to Twitter, they go to Instagram, they go to any place other than a Disney property to find out about Nashville. How does that work for Disney? So Disney's like, well, we're going to hold on to our data. That's great. So now your eyeballs are somewhere else. Your stock is going like that. Instagram stock is going like that. Right? Facebook, right? That's the problem.
And I think that's a dialogue. There's always, and that's something we've actually, never mind. We've talked about a lot at Viacom, is what's a smart way to use what's out there in the world, and what's a smart way to control what's inside. And remember, often what's out there in the world was actually sourced by your smart internal people, so there's a little bit of a play there. But yes, I think that's something, talking about the easy button piece of this discussion, some things are massively easier now. We can now do things at a scale and a speed that would have been unimaginable before. But what's happened, of course, is the goalposts have moved. There are different problems to solve now with the training, this issue of internal and external sharing and not sharing, the alignment, breaking down silos. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that. What are the new problems? We've done amazing things to solve some problems, but what problems are looming ahead?
Yeah, I would just start with why, to quote Simon Sinek. Why are you doing what you're doing?
That's always an excellent question.
So it seems like if you ask yourself why, if you're in business to engage audiences, then you should do things that engage audiences. And to the extent that you are hoarding your data behind a firewall, I don't see how that mission is being served.
There might be legitimate reasons to not share all your data. There's some data that's shareable and some data that isn't.
Absolutely, but I think you can share. You can look at it as a funnel, and right. So you can share enough data to feed your funnel and keep other pieces, proprietary.
Josh, what problems do you see looming ahead of us that we should all prepare for?
I think part of it is the stuff that's on-prem. So we've seen a lot of people say we want to do all of these great things, but they're stuck on storage systems that's in some proprietary LTO system behind some MAM system that can't see the light of the cloud. So people want to be able to create this metadata, but the limitation is they say, well, I want to do it on-premise only. And that limits what you can do, because you can't call a lot of these large systems like IBM Watson when you're on-premise. So then it's the trouble of, we need to move to the cloud. then they're like, well, which data do I need to move to the cloud, right? Someone talked about duplicates of Viacom. One of the big things we see is what do I actually have so I can decide what I want to run these metadata services against. So people just aren't in the cloud enough to leverage these services. That's what we're seeing a lot.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of, I think the interesting thing about some of these new companies like Netflix and Amazon, they started off as logistics companies, right? They didn't have all this legacy data. They could leapfrog ahead, and they're completely standards-based, by the way, on the standards issue. That's why they've been able to do this. And then they layered creativity on top of that. So it was a kind of a flip. I'd be interested to see where they are in 10, 20 years. Will they have accumulated some of these legacy issues that some of the other companies have, or will, because they're starting in that way, will they maintain that over time? It's going to be interesting. Is it time for questions? Yeah, okay.
I just have one of the mic. There we go. So speaking of problems, right, you know, we're very good as a species at pattern recognition. One might argue it's the main thing our brains do. Computers are obviously getting there. We've been talking about that. But one of the things that inherently makes us quite different from the machines is whimsy. If you think back, everyone, at that video that the MTV folks showed, that Aretha Franklin video, there was clearly the best part of it, which was when they're like, oh my God, Aretha's trash. Will we get to the point, do you guys think, that we can teach a machine to understand that that might be the one-liner that's most appealing to a human because of a particularly human whimsical, quality? And is whimsy a very advanced form of pattern recognition? Can we apply very advanced pattern recognition? Is whimsy discoverable by that means?
I have a point of view about that. So I think by analogy, if you think about Waze, the traffic application, very interesting synthesis between humans driving their cars and machines making maps, and it produces a very useful service, particularly in LA. If you're trying to get from point A to point B, you really rely on Waze to help you navigate that. I think programming is filled with interest events. I think the fact that Giphy is now worth $270 million is a pretty clear example of the degree to which humans are prepared to go to memorialize the things that they're interested in. And so this is this is where I get so frustrated with the media and entertainment complex, because you have fans out there that love your stuff and who would could pin or flag or tag or comment on the parts of the content that interest them, and the machines could do the parts that they do well, and the humans could do the parts that they do well, and you'd have this wonderful world of these moments, these salient moments. The trash moment should be findable, right? Like as an interest event. But the data's in the silo. We don't. Even the MPAA, I was looking at their guidelines. They don't even acknowledge their annotation, like they call them reviewer guidelines. I was trying to see if how they dealt with crowdsourcing. They don't even recognize it as a thing. It's a one-way read-only world that they believe exists, and it's not. It's a two-way read-write world. And so by promoting standards that don't acknowledge that it's a two-way world, they box themselves into a corner that they're never going to get out of, because the rest of the world, Amazon, won't have that point of view. They'll open it up.
But that's a cultural shift. A lot of this is, for so long, we talked about it earlier, commercial interest or political power was about hoarding. And moving from that to breaking down silos and sharing at least some, or reusing at least some of what you have. I will point out that a lot of the stuff that's out there shared is sourced originally by people themselves. So media companies are sourcing IMDb and then checking IMDb. There are issues around here, but it's a change management, knowledge management, cultural shift moment we're having.
I think, Nick, it comes back to context. It came up earlier. So in that clip, there was excitement, surprise, the trash can, it was all there. I think the graph that Jim showed earlier was that now, over time, the accuracy is like 4% of errors for like tags and machine learning. I think machines have to be able to look at context. There was a lot of things happening in that scene. You can run tools now and it will say happy, joy, excitement, surprise, but how do you take all of that together? I think that's where the humans are still needed with the curation side to say, well, this moment was the combination of all of these words and things that happen. And I think we're a little ways from seeing it, but it's definitely context that matters.
But do you think neural networks themselves may be able to get bred to a point of sophistication where it's going to be able to understand what correlates those things that you alluded to?
There's a whole industry in the like offshoot of the face detection world called, they call it biometrics now, right? And it's all these companies that are looking at like mood and emotion estimation from expression. And Apple has made acquisitions in this space. Facebook has made acquisitions in this space. So I just was sitting here in the crowd this morning, and one of my engineers sent me a brand new web service that is just like it's just a sentiment analysis, a system for movie content based on the transcript, just NLP, neural net, looking at the transcript, doing sentiment. So people are knocking at the door of the problem. I don't think we're anywhere near the richness of human expression when it comes to things that are funny or humorous, and that's where I think that there's still this wonderful opportunity for ways like partnership, between humans and machines, right? So it's coming, it's not there, and there's opportunity, big opportunity in that space.
I think maybe let's open it up for questions.
One thing not on the problem, something that's not a problem is scale. So let's just, we got this something, because I know you were saying what problems do we have. Scale isn't a problem in the cloud. So we talked earlier about images. You can process video with the same scale in the cloud, so that we shouldn't be afraid of scale. And with more scale comes the pricing as well. That's not the issue. It's been able to leverage the scale of the cloud.
Yeah, no, I definitely, scale is almost a fixed problem, right? It's pretty much, we or the world has fixed that problem. It's utilizing it. But still, I think we're going to open up for questions now. I'm going to make a bold move.
We do have other mics that are floating around, so guys, just choose people who look the coolest and with the most interesting questions, please.
Hello, it's Christy King again. Sorry, I've turned into Nick today. Sorry.
I wonder what you're doing at DAS next year, Christy.
Oh my God, we have two!
I'm curious, since both of you are vendors, if you've had companies come to you and start to draw the connection between programmatic style, sorry for the terrible phrase, I know everyone in that industry hates that phrase, but programmatic style, ad buying, those kinds of marketplaces, and the data that's coming out of content creators and starting to marry up. If Disney has a bunch of stuff where everything is frozen, is North Face now buying ads that every time any of that content shows up somewhere, North Face wants to be attached to it? Totally making that up, so it's probably a silly example, but I guess that's what I'm looking for is, are people starting to see the content association with an ad buying association and seeing how those ideas might work? Are those even discussions yet?
I think similar to what you're saying, in India, we've seen a lot of interest. I think it's the other way around from what you're saying we want to know what's in our content so we can go out and sell those ad units. I don't know if that's what you're saying. So we've seen it the other way around. They want to understand what they have so they can go out and actually drive car commercials tied to all of the moments in the clips that have cars. So we're seeing that.
Interesting. Yeah, no, that's actually where I was going, but I guess I keep thinking of it more from the producer perspective. So two ways. Can you make it so that agencies or brands could find content they wanted to be associated with, and or can producers actually kind of start to use these sets of data as inspiration for how to, as you started to say earlier, create content that likely has interested people out there who want to watch it? To me, that's kind of the same thing.
So going back to 2014, that was really, in a way, Disney's motivation, right? Like, they were looking at Netflix and just saying, oh my God, we've got to get on top of this, right? but we've been working for the last 18 months with a lot of YouTube multi-channel networks. So those are interesting digital-first guys that don't have any legacy at all, and they're very nimble and they do creative things. So we've been seeing interest from brands, but also from producers, like both sides, both the supply and the demand side. People not wanting to like even hop over. So it's the same thing you're describing. They want to be able to create greater yield from the engagement that exists natively in these ecosystems, but they're wanting to skip right over the advertising phase to, because with linked data, you could just as easily, you could click on the ad and watch the ad, but you could just as easily click on the thing and buy it from Amazon in one click, right? So they want to jump right over that and create, back to sort of direct marketing 101, a direct action funnel, and that's all because of the sort of principles of linked data, right? So that's the one side. The other side is, as we've done user studies with these kinds of experiments and these YouTube channels, we've also found that the millennials, for example, are not interested particularly in, I'm going to call YouTube content long-form content. So there's about 12 minutes, 45 seconds is the average length of a YouTube video. They're not even interested in that. They're interested in 3, 4, 6 seconds, video snacks. And so, we're working with numerous YouTube multi-channel networks that are reprocessing the archive using vision systems so that we can do like automated video summarization or video haikus, whatever you want to call them, creating little 8-second summaries from the underlying content. So it is a version of what you've just described, and that's driven by insights into how and what the millennial and Z-Gen audience wants.
Something else that's come up with 3 European broadcasters, and I know you have a broadcaster channel background, Christy, is that they're trying to get away from the linear channels, and because they own the set-top and they own the .com property and they own the bill in the household, using that user data, and they've got the ad tie-in on the box to actually create dynamic program schedules from the whole of their DAM system. And say, because I know your household is got this 33-year-old and a 45-year-old, rather than give you the linear feed, they're looking at how could they replace like 65 scheduling coordinators at a broadcaster and kind of leverage all the machine data you've got, program data, billing data, and I guess this is an element of AI to say, well, let's create that program for that household and know who's in front of that set-top box. We've had 3 broadcasters want to play around with that idea.
And Josh, to your point, I mean, is not music the canary in the coal mine for this? Has not Pandora and Spotify, those playlists are algorithmically generated playlists. Why can't you do the same for audio-visual content?
And I think the other thing, it's no offense to the sellers and the studios in the room, but I think the people that are really going to pioneer this and succeed, I think are the buyer side of this, not the seller side. So over the years, we've seen there's more things happen quicker with the guys that are buying the content than the people that are selling it. So that's why we've gone after a lot of the broadcasters.
And Josh, you could even generalize that and just say the demand side almost, because this, I think, the Instagram generation almost expects that kind of delivery, right?
I think that's true. I just want to walk back the scale thing a little bit. We have kind of fixed scale for now, but because of the exponential increase, never mind, of video being created, that's probably going to be an ongoing problem to solve, even though for any individual user, you can go to the cloud. Yeah. So I do want to just say that.
And we've found something with video, I don't know what you found, is that we've had to make the economics work. We've had to break up video into stills, to come back to Jim's point, for these big machine learning platforms to work. So if I was to take 1,000 hours of video and run it through any of the 4 large machine learning platforms, it's just going to take forever in the way that they go about it. So we've been programmatically breaking the video up into stills based on the type of content that it is, processing the stills, and we found the economics of that and what we can get back to a customer is radically different than if you're running the full-length programming and having to wait for the programming to run. So that's something to Jim's point on images.
Yeah, and just to build, I mean, so like economically that makes sense, and I wonder too in terms of usage and behavior, Jim showed the segmented video, and in the first or second slide there was, we're looking for a specific region or spatial thing inside the video. I kind of imagine you process it with all these vision technologies. What you're doing is turning your library into Lego parts, And then you have all these Lego parts with nice standards-based interfaces that allow you to assemble them together into new contexts or allow the demand side, this generation of mixers and mashers to create completely new things from this underlying archive content. I think that's really interesting and potentially quite
I
significant.
think we have another question. Okay.
Hi, Lee Shoulders from Getty Images. And speaking of Lego parts, that's a perfect segue. We deal primarily with stock footage, and I'm curious about how you maybe would handle things like hierarchy or relevancy, because I can see the point of tagging content factually for all the information that might be within it, from an archival perspective even. But we find that over tagging or over keywording can be problematic, because then it won't return search results that are as relevant as what might have been entered. So the fact that a dog is, running in the background for 1 second across the scene might be factually true, but it's not relevant when somebody searches for a clip of a dog, and they want the dog as the primary element of the clip. So I'm just curious how that might.
So we just finished last year a project for one of the biggest YouTube partners, and they work with brands to contextualize YouTube. So if I'm BMW and I want to advertise on YouTube, to me as an agency, it's like a big swamp. So this company works with YouTube and with the agencies to sort of curate subsets of the data that are, I want to say, not only ad safe, but also ad optimal, right? Where they're going to get the highest yield. And so they had this exact problem, right? There's a dog, and the machine vision system says the video is about a dog, or that there's a dog in the video, but is the video about a dog, right? And so we worked on this problem, we called it video salience. We wanted to kind of page rank for video, right? That's something that would tell us that this video is actually salient for that topic. And we ultimately used this multimodal approach, fusing a combination of vision and NLP together into a ranked, scored index. And that worked pretty well. I think that at least is directionally how one might go about it. Each of these little predictions from all those different systems have little confidence scores next to them. If you look at them in isolation, they can be misleading, but if you look at them over the duration of a shot or a scene, the sort of truth about what's happening there, in air quotes, truth, sort of does bubble up. And you have smart people in Getty that are, like guys like Andreas Gebhardt, if you don't know him, he works on this diligently. Yeah, so.
Josh, same perspective?
Yeah, I did a bit of time with some stock footage at Thought Equity, T3/Wazi. They've had 3 names. We're using a similar approach, but at the moment I don't have an answer for it. We've had about 3 or 4 people that have traditional stock footage tagging workflows, and what we're trying to do is understand with their current cost today for tagging, and then using this technology, does it make sense now? Where can they save money? Because we've seen a lot of people outside of North America that are just keep hiring video loggers. They just keep throwing more people at the footage. So we're trying to figure out with how, if it was boat, kayak, water raft, all that contextual, when you're searching for it to give you back something else, does machine learning help, and does the economics add up? So I don't have a good answer, but we're taking the same approach and trying to figure out, can we update the content owners' workflows around stock footage? Because I think it's a workflow that needs updating. People have been doing stock footage the same way for a long time. So
we have time for, I think, one more question, and I want to know who has the most controversial question in the room on this subject.
Christy King?
We're talking about AIs taking over our media, people. Anyone? Sarah Simlier, you come up with controversial now. Scott. Oh, let me give you the mic, Scott.
So when it comes to AI, and we see IBM and Microsoft getting engaged, and maybe they're going to be the big dogs, with data mining on media, this is controversial, right? Who do you see, leading in the media space, if not Microsoft and IBM, who else?
I don't think that's a controversial question. I think it's a good question, to be honest. We leverage all of them that are out there. I mean, we just came out of NAB, and to be honest, we were on Microsoft booth, Amazon booth, and the Oracle booth, right? They've all got technologies. I think you've got to look at what do they have available today? What do they actually have in their IP stack that they're not sharing, that they're using for their own good, right? So a lot of stuff that Amazon has is been leveraged on Alexa before it comes publicly available. And then look outside of the big guys, because there's a lot of smaller entities. You talked about it. I mean, they're popping up every day. People that are building machine learning and AI. The trouble is, do you plug them all in, or which ones are better? Which ones are smoke and mirrors? And the other thing is, a lot of these people sell to developers. That's the key thing. So when you make this statement about Microsoft live in a partner ecosystem, right? They'll sell you an API that's going to return back data. They're not giving you a product around it. IBM announced at NAB that their video cloud group actually are going to sell a product that has a front end on the front of Watson. So I think it's not controversial. There's a lot of them, and you use some of them as well.
I think it's not controversial at all. I would just say, from my perspective, the progress that we've seen in artificial intelligence, in image recognition, language understanding, has come from a combination of open source frameworks, things like Caffe and TensorFlow, open source vision models, or let's just say open source models, things like ImageNet or Inception, I think is the ImageNet model, or Coco, the Coco model. And then finally, community data, like these big data sets that train on. So I don't think that Google is amazing. I think some of their stuff works very well. I don't know that they have a unique competitive advantage. And I think particularly if you're within a domain, they're trying to solve everything. If you're trying to solve a specific problem, you're often better if you have technical resources, just taking open source models, open source frameworks, and community data and training for your specific problem. And you'll outperform them at those kinds of specific tasks almost every time.
And just quickly, they're not scoring the other guys publicly. So for example, we'll run an image or a video through 8 of the major ones we use, and we get a score. So if we were working with a large library, one particular show for a network might be better to run through Google because of the type of content that it is, but another show or a bunch of movies might be better to run through the Microsoft platform. So we treat it pretty open and just pick the right one.
I was going to say, Josh, in the text NLP world, in the south of France, there's an organization very involved in semantics called Eurocom, and in NLP, they built a framework called NERD, N-E-R-D, and it was named Entity Recognition, whatever, Disambiguation. So it was a harness that tied together all of the commercial services. They aligned the taxonomies, and what they got is this massive lift in both precision and recall, because they, not each of the services would perform well at one thing, maybe not the other, and so by using them as an ensemble, they got this big lift. And I think that's something that could well be coming for vision.
And it's not a point at time. You were saying yesterday at lunch, it's what they do in 30 days from now, what they do in 15,
exactly.
Because this is a live index, it's a live system.
You want to keep nimble is the
Yeah.
thing. You don't lock yourself into any one system. This is a very fast-moving space, and you enjoy all the connectivity that is now available to you and utilize all that's out there and all that's going to be coming out there.
Yeah, I would say agility is really a key.
Absolutely. Agility is what you need.
All right, guys. Well, Todd, Josh, and of course Sally, who has been a big part of helping plan today over the past months, thank you so much. We are doing our lunch break now.